All right, so now let's talk a little bit about connection. Obviously, in a fully remote situation, everybody's on their own little island, right? So, connection is a big thing. How do you feel connected in a fully remote work situation, in a fully remote learning situation? How does that happen? So, one of the statistics we had on this is actually kind of interesting. So, was 75% of remote workers feel connected to their colleagues, even though a majority work across time zones, which I was like, okay, 75%, that's a good number. But then I started thinking, well, that means like a quarter of the people, fourth of the people don't feel connected. I'm like, that's not good. That's not, I would want, I would definitely want that number to be higher. If that was like my work situation, I would not be comfortable with a quarter of the employees not feeling connected.
And I know we don't have this, but it would be like, what would you guess it's like in real life? I mean, in person. Do you think there would be 25% of people who are disconnected? How many introverts are there? Because they probably the introverts.
Well, I would say, I mean, so you're trying to intimate like if you're an introvert, you're going to feel disconnected. Is that what
No,
you're?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying,
Well, I mean, I was just kind of clarifying. I was just wondering where you were going with that.
well, no, I'm just picturing, imagining an office building. I mean, there could be people that are not as connected. I mean, I've worked in those cube farms in the past where, some people are always talking and so connected to others, and others come right in on time and, leave immediately when work's over and don't do the after work activities and things like that.
I mean, I guess it really is. How are they defining connected? Because I mean, you have to admit, like if you're all in the same building, you're usually at least aware of people.
You see them.
Right. So in a fully remote situation, yeah, you're not going to, I mean, you either know people or you don't. I mean, there's probably, I would assume in a fully remote work situation, there's some people that work in the same company that they don't even know each other because if the departments are very compartmentalized and there's not a lot of crossover. And I guess it would be the same in a building too, right? Like if all the engineers are on the eighth floor and all the accountants are on the second floor, how much do those two groups mix together and know each other? And I mean, maybe you're right. It would be interesting to know what that statistic is in a office setting.
Just holistically, let's say we'll go with it 75% connected, 25% not connected. This reminds me of when we've worked with some distance ed people in higher education. And one of the things that is of concern, especially with online classes, fully remote classes, is presence and how the instructor, the professor, how do they demonstrate presence in a fully remote instructional setting, and how do students how can they basically be seen or be present in class? And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. I would definitely say it is harder when you're fully remote. It has to be more intentional. I know that's a word we use a lot, but you do have to be thoughtful. Otherwise, you could go the entire time never seeing people, never really being connected.
Well, yeah, and what I'm thinking now too is I think when it is fully remote, there's more of a strategic intention to connect people. Where I think when everybody is in the same office or in the same building, it's just like, oh yeah, they'll see each other and everybody will cross paths in the hallways and the break rooms. So it's probably a lot less, and I guess I shouldn't make that big of an assumption, but I would say that I think often it's probably less intentional when everybody comes to the same building than it is when it's fully remote. You're very conscious of like, okay, there's no way these people are going to see each other unless we have a specific process and strategy to have them connect with one another in a meaningful way.
It has to be built into the culture. And I thought that was interesting that most of the collaboration was happening currently through messaging apps for 50% of remote workers, email 22%, and then meetings at 19%. Yeah, definitely the messaging apps. I think that was when we talked about the changes in technology that enabled remote work, work from home, I think the messaging apps are huge. And then you notice in the evolution of them, at first we were like, oh, just to be able to, text to someone else. And then as the communication became richer, as you talked about in video, like I can remember the first time when I got my master's years and years ago before the messaging apps were invented. And so it was completely text based, not no emojis. We would do the little ASCII characters to have little emojis. And now you look at the messaging apps and how many features in there, not just, the business or instructional features, but also the ones to have a little bit of humor and a little bit of personality within those. And I think that is really important because you have to be able to laugh and
I mean, I'm still trying to figure out a way to incorporate animated GIFs into my in-person communications. Cause like I'm, not to brag, I'm pretty good at that. Like I just have the animated GIF and my introverted mind mix well together. And like, I feel like I could communicate this so much better. Like sometimes I just want to be like, can I just hold my phone up and show you this animated GIF instead of like actually talking to you about this?
I don't know, you're pretty good with your memes too. Could you just act them out and maybe you just have some bold text you take with you and periodically you could just do the facial expression and then add that.
But yeah, I would agree. The messaging apps, I mean, that has been huge because basically, at least in my work experience, everything that I get on a messaging app used to be just another additional email. So email would be like out of control. It would be hard to, I'm pretty good at email too. And even for somebody like me, I'd be like, I'm getting lost in like where this conversation is going. So the messaging apps have greatly helped like the quick little
Yep.
back and forths about things when you're in more of an asynchronous situation. We talked about this the other day too. I haven't used this. I was going to say very much, being honest, at all. But like people that like do the recorded video messages and the recorded audio messages, I could see that being very helpful as well, especially like to get to know, it's like when we talked about that, I mentioned like if you don't really know somebody and you read their text, like sometimes you're adding like things into the text, or I mean, heck, it could have been like auto corrected. They think they said something to you, it auto corrected. Nobody knows it's auto corrected. And you're like, did this person really just say this to me? And so I think that can be taken the wrong way, where if you actually heard them say it or saw them say it, heard and saw them say it on a video, even if it was recorded, that probably would be better in a situation where you don't know people that well.
Kelsey and Colin use Snapchat, and so I snap with them. And that's one of the things, like if it's, important news or they're very excited about something, or if it's long. That's the other thing of like if it's long text or they want to show something with it, it makes sense to have the little short form recorded video. They don't need a response immediately, but they can send it to me. And then, later when I have time, I can look at it and get it back to them. Some of our tips for effective remote work, because as we've kind of laid some of these out, there are some challenges. We're going to share some tips on creating a schedule, communicating with your manager, and investing in the technology. So starting out with a schedule. And as I was thinking about this can be taken in many different ways. So you think about your personal schedule, you think about the short-term company schedule, school schedule, what you're working with, and then kind of your longer term, which I was thinking in terms of personal, like what are your working hours? Everybody has like, these are my working hours during the day where you're really focused on that. And so I know some people that have access to and participate in remote work will have a time where they have to go pick up the kids or something. So making sure your personal schedule is established with your team, then also coming at it from the manager or the professor end of it. So what does the schedule look like, for the week, for the month, that longer term, and then building in within that, what are the synchronous and asynchronous times? So all the different things that need to be very spelled out within the schedule, because you're losing your incidental contact where you're like, oh, I forgot to say this. You're going to need to be very explicit and direct in that. So other thoughts you had on schedules?
Yeah, the way I was thinking about the schedule too was just in my internal thinking about just like, oh, because I'm by myself a lot. I find it helpful to be very specific about what I'm going to work on when, especially if it's like a bigger project or something where I'm like, okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to work on this and not just be like in the past, I might be like, here are the 6 things I want to get done today. And some days it works, that can still work some days if it's going to be a light day, but like when there's a lot of stuff going on and I have something that really want to get done, it's like it's helpful to schedule the specific time to do it. In addition to that, like breaks too. Like I think it's like, okay, make sure you take you're going to take a break from 11 to 12 to have lunch or something. Obviously you're self-imposing this, so maybe you're on a roll and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna stick this out today or whatever. For me, like I kind of have certain like I'll have like I'll get up, do some work, then I kind of take a little bit of a break, go for a walk, then I come back and have another work session, then I might take another break and go to the gym. And so I find if I break my day up like that, it's more helpful and I feel better versus like I sit down at 8 and then I look up and it's 5 and it's like, whoa, like, and there's days like some days, that's how it goes, right? It's you want to be careful to not be like, okay, that's every day because you'll end up getting burnt out. And then when you do want to schedule things to work on too, you want to limit the distractions, right? Like you might turn your phone off or put it on silent or to shut your email down. So it's because it's very easy to let the distractions get in too. Take advantage of the fact that you're fully remote. Like when you're in the office building, you only have so much control over the distractions. Like if Ryan is sees that your light is on in your office and he always wants to stop in and talk to you, there's only so much you can do about that without like being like, dude, no, not today.
That definitely being able to have a little control over your day. Now, fully understanding not all job roles have that. So if you are more customer focused, so you'll need to, work with your team to have coverage and how that would be handled, which takes us into the next topic of communicating with your manager. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, you pretty much covered that, I think, because my thought is you want to make sure you say here's what you want your manager to know what your schedule is, especially if you have flexibility. Like if it's pretty much locked down, like you're supposed to be here and doing this at certain times, you don't need to communicate. But if it's more like you get to make your own schedule, you want your manager to know here's when I'm going to be available, here's when I'm not going to be available, here's when I'm going to be meeting with the customer, here's when and same for people that might report to you or other teammates that you might be a resource for. Like I know at our company, like people be like, okay, they want to make sure they tell people I'm going to be out of the office and I'm not going to have access. I'm not going to have good internet access. So you might not even be able to reach me. Where sometimes it's like I want to be out of the office, but if you need me, call me because I'll see the call and I'll be able to answer. So it's important to definitely communicate not just with your manager but your teammates and other people that report to you. And then on the technology resources, we covered. I would say we covered this when we talked about success tips and talked about the environment. But just to reiterate, like there's certain things you want to invest in technology wise or resource wise when you're fully remote. Like if you have an uncomfortable chair, you want to rectify that because that's what you're going to have to be sitting in. You want to figure out like, okay, I'm going to need a different way to sit or what to do. Like you're more, I'm more like, yeah, my back just hurts every day. Like I'm an idiot like that. But you're more like, you got the ball, you got the standing desk.
That was because I learned that after the house fire, because, I was not in my regular setup. The two friends that I stayed with had different office chairs, and I'm used to not sitting in a chair. So I'm used to just sitting on my ball. And yeah, so then I did develop some aches and pains there. So it is really important to be really mindful of that because some people will, I know will sometimes do this if I'm working in different places to just have the computer literally on my lap or something in just a really terrible posture. And then the aches and pains that come from that, it's not a good environment. The other thing I was thinking of when you were talking about calls, what is your phone system like? Because a lot of the old type of the on-prem, big phone on the desk, when you're remote, are you going to have that or do you have other solutions for that? But yeah, and then along with just the investing in it, to making sure everyone understands how to use the tools, when to use them. That would be just being really clear on all of those. So that's kind of all of my thoughts
Yeah,
there.
and in that vein too, before we button this up, this wasn't a specific tip that we shared, and I feel like we talked about this at some point. I don't know what, but it's like you have to use your voice in a fully remote. And I know some people are, they're not somebody that like to speak up, especially if you're in a situation where like your manager, your superior, is somebody that like I had a boss one time that was like, my door's always open, but anytime you like utilize that, he was not happy about it. So it was like, I know you say your door's always open, but it doesn't really feel that way. You still have to be like, okay, this might be unpleasant, but I'm going to have to say something. Otherwise, like, you're going to end up doing yourself a disservice if, like, do you understand that? And you're like, you're thinking in your mind, no, but I'm going to say yes because I want to seem like I'm agreeable. That's probably not going to end up turning out well. So you got to just be like, you know what? Here's what I think you said. Tell me if I'm wrong. You're gonna have to figure out a way to overcome that a little bit.
Definitely. And so I think building onto this in the next part, when we're talking about cameras on and off, and we'll be connecting that back to, adding that into the layer of tips and connections as well.